YouTube Week continues here on the Rubin Report, and joining me today is Justin Little, aka Vernaculus. Justin, how are you?
I'm fantastic. You?
I'm doing well. You know, you were one of the people that when we decided to do the YouTube Week, your name kept popping up in my Twitter feed. People said, you've got to talk to the Vernaculus. For a while, I thought your name was Vern. Apparently, it's not Vern, it's Justin. No. For people who have no idea who you are, what you do, give me a little breakdown of Justin and what you're doing on YouTube.
I'm a writer. I write political essays generally, and I just argue with people on YouTube. One of the main topics I'm covering right now is the media at present.
Yeah, the media, which you've done some excellent videos on, and it's one of the things I see you tweeting about all the time. On your YouTube bio, I want to get this right, it says that you do opinions, journalism, politics, satire, literature, and music. What's not to love? Which one of those do you love the most?
I would probably say literature. I've always been a big reader. I think I read my first book, which was The Giving Tree, to my mother when I was 2 years old, or something like that. It was always something I was really good at. I was always good at analyzing books, figuring out what the themes are, that sort of thing. And then I discovered the work of George Orwell, who I'd say is my favorite author, easily. Mm-hmm. He was able to meld politics and literature in a way that I try to emulate.
Yeah, The Giving Tree, that's some sort of communist manifesto, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Big Marxist family, my family.
It doesn't end well for the tree. That's the sad part.
Yeah, it just gives and gives and gives, and there's no return.
I know the feeling. I know the feeling. So tell me, how'd you get involved in the YouTube thing? When did you decide to start putting videos out there, get your name out there, and start saying what you believe?
I was a frequent reader of newspapers, and a lot of things that were said in my local newspaper in the opinion column sort of, it got me going a little bit, and I had no outlet to express these things. I tried pitching various articles to various people, and nobody wanted to take them, and I was just getting out of the music industry, and I wanted a way that I could exercise my left brain and my right brain at the same time. And so I tried to sort of hone my writing, public speaking skills with YouTube, and then eventually people started liking what I had to say, and it just snowballed into this thing, and now it's what I do professionally. So.
Yeah, so this is your full-time gig?
Yep, it is.
How does that feel? That's got to feel pretty good, right? I mean, I guess I know a little bit about that, but how does it feel for you?
It's very liberating. I don't have to answer to any editors. I don't have to worry about, the only people I have to worry about are my audience, pretty much. I answer to them ultimately. And hopefully I think that my audience realizes that I come to my opinions through reason, rationality, sort of thinking things through. I don't, at least I try not to jump to conclusions. And so my audience has always been very engaging. And so if I say something that the majority of my audience disagrees with, they're not just going to abandon me. They're gonna try and convince me, which is which is an attitude I'm trying to foster. So.
It's sort of a special group of people online that can engage in reason and logic, right? I mean, everybody's just screaming at everybody all the time. So it's a little harder, basically, to cultivate an audience that cares about those things.
Yeah, exactly. But you have to radiate that attitude. You have to make evidence seem cool again, I suppose.
Yeah.
And that's not what's fashionable at the moment.
Yeah, but it seems to me that people want that. I mean, that's what I try to do here, is that I don't scream about everything. I try to present all kinds of different views and all that. And I think people actually do want that. They just keep eating shit because that's what they're being fed.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. I think there does need to be a balance between the the argument, which can be heated and passionate, but there also needs to be a time where you detach and sort of say, okay, I'm out of the political trenches now. How do I think I did? How is everything working out for me so far? And then you can analyze what you've been doing and reassess if you need to.
Yeah. So what are some of the big topics that you're hitting on right now?
Right now, well, I did a recent video about the whole Michael Flynn resignation issue, because that was insane. There were multiple articles that were, blowing this completely out of proportion, saying that this whole resignation was evidence of that Michael Flynn violated the Logan Act, which I think if Henry Kissinger can't be charged under the Logan Act, then that law is just there for posterity at this point.
For people that don't know, the Logan Act, you want to explain what the Logan Act is?
Well, the Logan Act prevents private citizens from engaging in diplomacy. And with the transition, Michael Flynn, the former national security advisor, it is not. It's very common for the transitioning administration's officials to speak with various ambassadors just so they can get a handle on who they're engaging with, sort of introductions, things like that. That's not a violation of the Logan Act. If a campaign, though, were to travel to a different country or talk to someone and say, "Hey, look, we're about to get elected. We can get you a better deal on this," like that sort of stuff. But the president was already selected at that point, so I think it's entirely appropriate for people who are going to be engaged in diplomacy to contact those people.
Yeah. So do you think that the Trump administration dropped the ball on that by, most likely they forced him out at the end of the day?
I think, this is kind of a cliche, but I think the cover-up was sort of worse than the crime. I think what happened with Michael Flynn was essentially Mike Pence was made to look stupid because he defended Michael Flynn when Michael Flynn denied that sanctions had come up in the conversation. Michael Flynn then sort of rolled it back and said, "Oh, well, I can't be 100% sure if it came up," that sort of thing. And Mike Pence defended him and said that this was not discussed. And then the leaks came out, and it said that these did come up. And then we got conflicting reports on the resignation from Kellyanne Conway, the counselor to the president, who said it was all Michael Flynn's decision. He decided that this was, the right path for him. And then you have Sean Spicer, the press secretary, and Trump saying that Donald Trump requested that he resign. So it's all a big mess, and it displays a lot of incompetence on both the part of the current administration and the press.
Yeah, so I'm glad you mentioned the press on that, because it seems to me that, it shows a certain amount, a lack of coordination at best, maybe outright negligence at worst on the part of the administration. But as far as the media, when I was watching the whole thing unfold, it was like, of course, everyone that hates Trump was making it sound like this was a massive scandal and this was going to reach all the way to Trump and this would be the thing that the resistance could impeach him on, because they're already all about impeachment.
Yes,
the president for a month and a day or something. And even that was, to me, I almost thought that the media reaction is becoming a bigger problem than sort of certain ineptitude out of the administration.
Yeah, we don't have a way to effectively call out any incompetence from the administration, because the people who it's sort of their job to hold the government accountable can't seem to do that effectively. And so we have just two competing counter narratives when something has to be true. And it's possible for the press to lie about things, and it's possible for the administration to lie about things. And that occurred with this whole Michael Flynn resignation issue.
Yeah. Do you think it's almost too late for the press in a certain way to get their mojo back? Because that's what I've been seeing over the last couple of weeks, that it's like these guys failed for so long under Obama and didn't call out things, didn't hold his feet to the fire on the red line thing in Syria, or why are we doing drone strikes in Pakistan? If you like your healthcare, you can keep it. Going to the White House Correspondents' Dinner, all the coordination with the DNC and the major media outlets, all of that stuff, that they didn't do anything for 8 years. And now it's like they're all trying to act like tough guys. And, and then at the same time, Trump eats a well-done steak with ketchup and they get outraged about that. And then once they're outraged about that, it makes any legitimate criticism seem ridiculous. So it is almost too late for them at this point.
Yeah. Well, first off, eating your steak well done with ketchup is an outrage. Okay.
Listen, I go rare and I don't use ketchup. I'm just saying we don't all need to create a impeachment process because of it.
Yes, yeah. It's funny to joke about on Twitter, but that's not something that should be a scandal at this point.
Right.
But I think
But is that part of the problem? That they've taken every little thing. Kellyanne Conway's got her feet on a couch while taking a picture.
Yes.
People go bananas. So that people can't regulate what is important and what is dribble.
Yes. I think the press has a massive issue with being unable to identify a real scandal when it surfaces, because they're too worried about trivial shit like feet on the couch, how Trump likes his steak prepared, like that sort of thing. But there's sort of a yin and yang effect that goes on with the press, because there is a sort of a liberal press, a progressive press, and a conservative press in the United States. And when Obama was in office, Fox News was very keen on sort of playing up, the most minuscule things about the Obama administration in an attempt to, sway opinion. But now that Trump is in office,
Michelle was trying to kill people with those school lunches or something, right?
Yes, absolutely. 100% true.
Yeah.
But now, sort of the press that wasn't routinely mocked, because Fox got a lot of, I think, just criticism over their playing up of all of the minuscule things done in the Obama administration. But there's sort of a yin and yang effect where now it's the tide's turning, and I think we're seeing outlets like CNN, New York Times, Washington Post, things like that. They are sort of they're becoming how Fox News was. They're going to play up any minuscule thing that's going on in the Trump administration as this is what'll finally get them, when we all know that that's not true.
How much of that do you think is them actually finally doing their job versus now they just want clicks and views?
It might be a combination of the two. Because obviously there's a political influence behind all this, like there was with Fox News. But CNN was keen on sort of playing down anything bad the Obama administration did. And so, but Fox was keen on playing up any of the, non-scandal scandals going on in the Obama administration. So I think they are starting to finally do their job, in a sense that they realize that the administration needs to be held accountable. But I think that a lot of that is mainly political in influence. It's not like they have this, they've seen the light and now have a concern for objective facts and things like that. I think they're using truth as a cudgel, pretty much.
Yeah, so where does the actual truth fit in on this, do you think? Because one of the things people ask me the most now is, who do I trust? How do I figure out what's true? How do I make any sense out of these stories where if you go on one site, you see it one way, one site you see it another way, and 80 other sites, 80 other ways? How do you figure out what's actually true? So like in a Flynn story like that, how many sources do you have to go to? How many articles do you have to read to get a handle on what you actually come to believe is true?
I think I read around 15 different articles about the Flynn story. And if there's a common thread through all of them, because you want to try to go to different outlets that have separate sort of political bedrocks, like Fox News, Breitbart. You want to go to CNN, MSNBC, ABC. You want to sort of pepper your way through all of these different outlets. And if there are common threads throughout all of them, like I mean, there are only so many ways to say 3 people were killed, and so you have to sort of sift through what's propagandistic language and the the truth to what happened. It's difficult to do, and what's unfortunate is that the media is supposed to be the entity that sifts through these things for us, and now they've sort of just become another thing that you need to sift through. And I think
Yeah.
that's a scandal, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's well said. I'm with you. So where do people like us fit in on this? This online group of people, a couple of whom I'm having on the show this week for YouTube Week, where do we all fit in on this? Because I think a lot of us are trying to guard a little bit of the truth. We're trying to show you who the bullshit artists are in the mainstream media and who's trying to give you a little more truth and all that. What's our role in all this right now?
Um, I think that the one of the only hopes that we have is alternative media. And what bothers me is that I see some alternative media outlets styling themselves in a similar vein to the mainstream media. And that, obviously, that won't get us anywhere. I think ultimately the funds for the alternative media need to come from the audience. They need to come from people who honestly do want a sifter. And that's what I think we do here.
Yeah. So do you get all your funds, all your monetization is all through YouTube?
It's not all through YouTube. I also have a Patreon account, which is just, I mean, you know what it's like.
Yeah.
Just sort of
So how does that
glorified tip jar, pretty much.
it's been very good to me. I have nothing but good
Yes.
things to say about my patrons. But you know, I've mentioned this a few times, but to me, Patreon, it's enabled me to truly say what I think, because I know that every now and again I'm going to do videos on things that will be demonetized by YouTube, in which if I wasn't getting outside money, I probably wouldn't waste my time. Not that I wouldn't want to talk about the same exact issues, but time is money. I don't have a limited amount of time, and I have to make a living at the same time. So do you factor any of that stuff in when you're picking what topics to talk about?
Um, Not necessarily. I've been very lucky to not have been sort of a victim of the demonetization scheme, and I think it's because I use vague titles. I always I try to throw a pun in there somewhere, or I try to be slightly vague with the titles and the tags and things like that because, well, I mean, it might be pretentiousness, but I think it's creative. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I've been able to avoid a lot of that, but I don't factor in what the sort of powers that be are going to do to my videos when I'm figuring out which topics to do. I just sort of do them, and then the consequences will be what they are.
Yeah. For the record, I'm not accusing you of doing that. I'm just saying
Oh,
that
no,
I know that there are obviously people who have to, if you have to rely solely on the monetization from YouTube, it might force you to cater what you're going to talk about. It's just a sort of fact of life.
Yeah. Money is a big, it's a big influencer. So
Yeah.
I'm not surprised that that would be happening to people.
Where do you fall politically? I know you're not big on labels. That's one of the things you talk about all the time. And I did see one of those charts, and it looked like you were sort of left libertarian, which is, I think, sort of in the realm of where I am. I think that's kind of in that classic liberal space. But again, these labels are all getting kind of nutty. But if you had to
Yeah.
describe what your political leanings are.
Um, I I would say I've always felt more home, or at least more comfortable with the sort of old school, like 50s liberal. You know, but my political identity has sort of always been in a state of flux. I grew up in a very conservative household, not so much socially, but my father thought that Social Security was, a a horrible socialist idea and things like that. And so I always tried to sort of be a counter in my immediate family at the dinner table. There's a lot of conservative things going around, and so I started to just read the work of George Orwell, as I mentioned, who, as much as some people would dislike my saying so, was a or at least self-professed democratic socialist. And so I would always sort of half in an attempt to challenge my family would just take the contrarian point of view. But I have always felt at home with old school liberals.
Yeah. Speaking of George Orwell, do you think we're veering into 1984 territory? Are we there already? I mean, between doublespeak that I see all the time on television, and I see what people, influential people, the way they tweet in a purposely confusing way, and the surveillance state and self-censorship, and the list goes on and on. I mean, are we in 1984? Was he just 37 years off, or 30? My math's not that good. What's that? 33?
Okay, I'm no math whiz. I can't help you there. But in a way, we are. We have lots of competing counter narratives at this point. A lot of political writing and journalistic opinion writing is very, very vague. It's very difficult to get someone to directly state what they think and why they think it, because once they do, they leave themselves open for refutation, pretty much. But there's a wonderful essay called "Politics in the English Language." I think that should be required reading. George Orwell sort of goes over why what was considered the intelligentsia at that point they weren't dealing with the world as it was. They were dealing with the world as they thought they think it should be, and how they thought. Sort of they would overhype the influence of their enemies in order to garner support. I think a lot of that's going on. So.
Yeah, so a lot of that's going on right now. I think a great example, and you've talked about the alt-right before, would be that. I mean, when people ask me what the alt-right is, I've said many times, and I've done videos on it, I think it's this amorphous blob of some part shit posters and Pepe the Frog people, and then there are some white nationalists, and there are some just disgruntled angry people. There are some people who don't even know what it is. There are some probably true bigots. I mean, it's a big mess of everything, but it seems to me that their intellectual opponents have made this group seem to be much bigger than it is because they needed a boogeyman. Is that basically what you're saying?
Yeah. I'd say that's appropriate. I mean, the alt-right has a difficult time defining itself, and so it's difficult to have an opinion on them because there are so many people define the alt-right in so many different ways. Even people within the alt-right. So it's difficult to say, I'm for the alt-right, I'm opposed to the alt-right, but there are sections within the alt-right that are pretty easy to oppose.
Right. So, okay. So the truly xenophobic portions of it, things like that. But then there's this whole group of people that are just kind of funny shit posters, and they're being thrown into Hillary's, 47% deplorables or whatever she said.
Yeah. I mean, I do not know what Hillary Clinton was thinking. Like that just seems like the worst possible move you could pull. I mean, if it's that easy to influence a political figure, then what hope do we have? I mean, I think I'm blanking on a name, but I think it was Nancy Pelosi. I think it was who, during a press conference or a presser of some sort, was referencing the tweets of a Michael Flynn parody account.
Yeah.
And so I'm just, is this what we're forced to deal with? Is
So how do we then, okay, so for guys like us that get internet culture because we're part of it, right? I mean, I see the type of things that you're tweeting about and I see the memes, and for all of us that are in on the jokey portion of this, how do we get other people to realize that it's not real? Because yes, that concept of Pelosi looking at a tweet by a parody account and thinking it's real, or all of these people, that these nobodies, they send this Nazi imagery to people just to upset them. They're not real Nazis. We're not in 1939 Germany right now. People think that we're in Indiana Jones, I think, and we're not. And how do we get that idea out there that it's just a lot of nonsense? And that doesn't say that there isn't anything bad going on here too, but that those things need to be decoupled.
Well, I think I think Douglas Murray said something very prescient. He said that there's a group of people who want bigots. They want bigots to exist. They want bigotry to exist just so that they can style themselves as an opponent of said bigotry. So if there's, let's say, some YouTube channel that only posts a bunch of, honestly bigoted things, right? And they have 5,000 subscribers, say, or something like that. That will be blown up as some sort of gigantic issue when, in all honesty, it isn't. It's a tiny little bubble of people who honestly should be opposed, but they have no power whatsoever. Their influence is incredibly small, and I think that ignoring it would be a better tactic than blowing it up, because that'll just get people interested in what's being said.
And there's absolute proof of that, because when Hillary said deplorables, next thing you know, they're energized, and then 3 days later, she's talking about Breitbart and reading the titles of Milo articles, and now you've given them literally everything that they want, the mainstream cred.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there is no bad publicity, I think, is what I think Milo said that at some point.
I'm not sure.
Like
it sounds like something he said. I don't know that he'd believe it these days, but
I don't know.
That's a different topic altogether. You're not a huge fan of Milo, right? Like, you thought that you understood him sort of as the provocateur, but thought that somehow muddled his message of actual factual points.
That's accurate. I think he values theater over the truth. But no one's ever explained to me the difference between a provocateur and a troll. I'm not sure if there is one. I'm not sure if there is one.
Maybe these days there isn't, because actually every article I read about the guy, they either call him a provocateur or a troll provocateur. So yeah,
but I think that's part of Milo's is part of his charm. I think it's sort of like if it's improper to tell a racist joke, he'll tell a racist joke. If it's taboo to say one thing, he'll say that thing. You know what I mean? And that is that you can only cash in that chip for so long, I think.
Well, is that the irony of his current situation then? That's the sword now that he's been impaled on? Although I did see his press conference, and I thought he did a pretty decent job of cleaning up what he said. And it's people. Speaking is not action, as I've tried to say many times.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where it's difficult trying to characterize Milo, because you're not entirely sure how much of it is a character and how much of it is him. So I'm not sure if he does he want to be taken seriously, or does he want to be someone who people brush off and say, oh, I'm not going to react to him because that's what he wants.
Yeah,
it's confusing. It's confusing to me, but that's.
Speaking of confusing, how do you get any truth out of what comes out of the online world? Because we talked about the mainstream media and what their shortcomings are, but the online world, there's a lot of good stuff, and there's plenty of people like you that are trying to put together some cohesive thought, and here's an issue and here's what's happening. But we also know that there's plenty of people that just want the clicks, that just want to spread nonsense and fake news and all that. How do we deal with that?
Well, I think that all comes down to money. I think because there are a lot of these clickbait sites that you see if you're on Facebook. You know, 5 most scandalous photos from the. And I
Yeah.
think with more people venturing away from standard print, like newspapers and things like that, uh, these companies are trying to get in on the online game. They want to get a piece of the pie, and so they've realized that this sort of clickbait strategy is advantageous. I think once they started doing the whole clickbait thing, they saw their income numbers increase a little bit, and they just started going down this path. Um, it's difficult to have to rely on the press for information at this point. I don't have a distinct solution. All I can say is don't trust the press, don't trust the administration. Try to get information uh, that doesn't have a propagandistic um, bedrock to it. And it's very difficult to do. It's very difficult to find, and you sort of have to piece it together in the way I mentioned previously. You have to look at 15 different articles from 15 different ideological sources, and then sort of sift through it in that way.
What are your main frustrations as a creator on YouTube with YouTube itself? This is something I'm trying to ask everybody on YouTube Week. You know, there's monetization issues and algorithm issues and things like that. Generally, I think most of us think this whole thing is a net good. But what are some of the frustrations that you have?
Probably the same as as those creators. There are algorithm issues. YouTube's not very good at um, informing you about what's going to happen next. They're very they sort of just do things and then gets feedback and then doesn't care about the feedback pretty much. But you know, I honestly I'd like to complain more, but I can't. You know, YouTube is sort of providing me my livelihood here. But there are things that I think should be rebuffed.
Yeah, and I know it's a fine line for everybody. As I said, it's a net good YouTube without question. I mean, this is the second largest search engine. We're able to get our videos across to everybody. Yeah, we all wish the monetization was a little higher, or they were a little more transparent about the algorithm, or a couple other things. But yeah, they're not charging us to do this, so that's pretty good, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Who are some of the other YouTubers that you get some influence from?
Uh, well, there's a YouTuber called the Justicar, he has a PhD in mathematics. He went to law school. Just a genuine polymath, like a photographic memory. This guy's fantastic, and he helped me sort of figure out um, how to be direct about things. Sort of weave a path of logic so that people can sort of understand what I think and why I think it. I think that's very important. And then there's another YouTuber by the name of Dr. Randomer Cam who sort of who satisfies the literary side of me. Very
He's doing
creative.
something with puppets, right? There's some puppet thing or
Yeah,
something?
yeah. He's the puppeteer guy, but he's very uh, a master of the English language, and so I enjoy him very much as well. And then I think the second sort of YouTuber that I was introduced to in the genre would be Sargon of Akkad. But yeah, I'd say those are the big three.
Yeah. How do you decide how much of yourself to get involved in all this? Because sometimes you do videos right at your webcam where you explain something. Sometimes you're not in them. Is that based in just personal choice or not wanting your face to be out there all the time, or what?
Um, well, when I started my YouTube channel, I wasn't much concerned about my face being out there. I didn't say my name or anything like that, but I wasn't concerned about my face being out there because I never thought I would be successful in the slightest. But I wasn't much concerned with that. And then as things started to happen as there was like there were doxings and people's personal information were coming out. I thought it would be a good idea to sort of uh, brand a little bit, come up with a character, and so that's why you have the little news guy.
Yeah, without
Uh,
going into all the specifics of the doxing situation because I know you went through that. Can you just give me the general feeling on that? I mean, basically, it's somebody finding your personal information, be it address or could be bank accounts or credit card number, et cetera, and posting it online.
yeah, I had somebody send me a message that had my name, the name of my siblings, my my parents, my grandmother, and said, oh, you wouldn't like if I released all of these things on 4chan, would you? Or something like that. It was strange. Um,
And
but at
what did
that
they
point,
want from you?
I'm not entirely sure, but it all came in the wake of my criticizing uh, another YouTuber's political position. It's just something I've sort of tried to keep, behind me. So.
Yeah. You fostered a pretty good community on your channel. I was looking through some of your videos, and I say this all the time. I'm incredibly proud of the YouTube comment section in our videos. As the channel's grown here, I can see sometimes it gets a little crazy because as things get bigger, you start losing, not that I ever had control of it, but you start getting all these new people in, some more fighting's going to begin. Okay, that's fine. But you've done a pretty nice job of cultivating like people that are pretty on point. That's really like the best compliment you could give a YouTuber, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I fully accept it. I appreciate it. But a lot of my comment section is pretty tame. I mean, you will get the occasional crazy person, and normally when things get the craziest is when I'm talking about something that's sort of like a hot button issue, like the Trump Flynn scenario. It was relatively tame in that comment section, but something like that is when the comments would go crazy.
Yeah. Who did you support for president? Is that info out there? Should I know that already?
I didn't necessarily. I didn't really support anyone for president between Clinton and Trump. Uh, I wanted to vote for Jim Webb, but he was booted out because the DNC was discontent with what he had to say. But
Is that
I
type of Democrat gone? Is the Blue Dog Democrat the sort of more moderate Democrat that if there was any piece of the Democratic Party left for me, that would probably be my wing of it? Does that exist anymore? I mean, I remember the one or two debates. I think he was in one debate, if I'm not mistaken. I was at one I covered it in Vegas. He was there. And it was like, he seemed like he was campaigning from another time. Or just from the
Yeah.
wrong, not that he deserved to be with the Republicans or should have been the Republicans, but it was like, this guy's on the wrong stage. I don't know what he should be doing, but it's not with Bernie and Hillary.
Yeah. He was. I think there are a lot of similarities between him and like a John Kasich type figure, who was sort of the moderate Republican in all of the debates. But I did end up voting for Ted Cruz in the primary because I thought he would be if anything, because I was dissatisfied with all of the choices I had. I thought he would be the most the strongest defender of the Constitution, at least. And so I cast my vote, and because I'm in Massachusetts, that didn't really matter. and that was that.
You're saying Massachusetts wasn't going to go for Ted Cruz?
I don't think so. That not a big conservative state. I mean, it was going to go to Clinton no matter what.
Right. How do we make the Constitution cool again? I've asked a couple guests this over the past few months, but I think if we could just get back to actually being governed by the Constitution, I mean, actually have our legislators and even our president read the Constitution, figure out what actually our rights are, what the role of the government's supposed to do, what the limitations are on each branch of government, I think we'd be in a much better situation than we're in right now.
Yeah, it's difficult to make the Constitution cool, but a lot of what's going on with the Constitution is that there's this attitude that's been permeating recently, where if if you don't agree with something, then it's necessarily unconstitutional. There's always that charge from people, but I think Justice Scalia said this at some point. Uh, I'm not sure if it was Justice Scalia, but the issue isn't whether I care about this or I support this. It's whether the Constitution does. And so there are a lot of people who sort of judge judges based on their uh, decisions, even if they don't agree with them, because they're bound by the Constitution, or at least they're supposed to be. So the Constitution doesn't care about your feelings. You know, it says what it says, and to I think that attitude is one of the main problems in that realm, at least,
Yeah.
where everything you dislike is unconstitutional.
Yeah, and now it seems that even the process of nominating a judge and getting a judge passed has become so absurdly partisan. I mean, the Republicans refused to take a vote on Merrick Garland for the last 8 months of Obama, and now I would be willing to bet anything that every Democrat's going to vote against anyone that Trump's going to put up there. So we've really hit a point in our system where the system itself is stuck, right?
Yeah, and you sort of have a pattern of judges rewriting the Constitution to suit themselves. And so if the judiciary is going to be that partisan, then I mean, I'd rather have some sort of public control, you know, some sort of control over who gets in, and you know, it all comes down to what new constitution is this judge going to write?
So give me an
And
example
so,
of that, because people say that type of thing all the time, and I think a lot of people don't really understand what they mean when they say that they're writing laws from the bench. Like, what's an example of something that's gone down that you thought wasn't right?
well, I think that and this might be a little bit controversial, but
Oh, well, if you're
I know,
gonna
crazy,
go
crazy.
there, uh-oh.
The ruling on gay marriage, I thought that they ruled incorrectly. I mean, I was ecstatic about the outcome. You know, I'm completely in favor of gay marriage across all 50 states, but the Constitution didn't have anything to do with that. And what the way I interpret laws and things like that is, you have to go back to the time in which the statute was written and what they thought it meant. Like, there are some people who think that the Constitution is a living document and that meanings change, but they really don't. If you want the meaning of the Constitution to change, you have to write an amendment. But I do think that it would have been possible to get the legislature to pass a bill saying that the definition of marriage would be changed to it applying to two men or two women.
Right.
And
So
that's the way that at least the Constitution says that these things should be done.
yeah, so I'm with you. I agree it's not a living document. We have to be governed by what's actually in it, and if you want to amend it, then you have to go through the process to amend it. In the case of the gay marriage ruling, so ultimately it passed because of equal protection. That's what they said, that it was equal protection under the law, that everyone should be treated equally. What in that did you not see as proper?
Well, it was the legal definition of marriage, and the challenge was to the equal protection clause, and the way that those two laws sort of interact with each other. The ruling was that that sort of thing would apply, and it just didn't.
So this is a case where, for you, it's like, all right, I don't really love what happened here, but the result was right. You kind of got to go along with it.
Yeah, you kind of have to go along with it. I mean, there was a case where um, it was on the issue of flag burning, and Justice Scalia voted that like differently from a couple of his conservative counterparts, but he thought that flag burning was 100% respected form of free speech, even though he personally doesn't like flag burning. And so it's difficult because the way the law works, it doesn't function through your morality. And so it's difficult to have a discussion about law without people um, impugning your morality. And but the law's not a pulpit, and it's very difficult to get that across because there are people who are so entrenched in these political struggles that if you agree or disagree about a legal decision, um, that means you're on a particular political side. And there's a I can't remember a name, but one judge said that there should be a stamp that says "stupid but constitutional," and I think that applies to the gay marriage case.
Right. So this is one where it's so emotionally charged that even if you were to convince me that equal protection under the law doesn't apply here because of the original definition of marriage, it's one where most people are just going to dismiss that. That we just don't live in a time where a rationality like that would really gain any traction.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think that if the sort of culture war that's been going on with gay marriage has been won by, in my opinion, the correct side. I just don't think that we needed the judiciary to change that, you know. And I'd be I'd be for a constitutional amendment that said, the definition of marriage is X, Y, Z, and it included two men and two women. So.
Right. Why do you think it didn't go down that way? Is that just the absolute cowardice of our people in Congress and in the Senate? I mean, that they just don't do anything. They just remain gridlocked constantly, and none of them wanted to put their butts on the line. Now they probably would all do it because now they can look at the polls, but over the course of time, they just didn't want to.
Yeah, I mean, there is a sort of a new narrative coming from the conservative camp where before this ruling took place, there were I think there were proposals in Congress for a constitutional amendment that would outlaw gay marriage and things like that, and that was supported by, in general, conservative senators, members of the House. And now that the Supreme Court ruling has come down, they were just thinking, oh, they started saying that conservatives don't argue this. They haven't ever argued this. They just want this. They just want the state out of marriage now. That's all we wanted, and it's just sort of like brushing aside the past, I don't know, 20, 30 years and things like that.
Right, that's funny. Look, I give progressives a lot of shit, obviously, but I do acknowledge that progressives and my liberals were clearly leading the fight on this. And I've had several Republicans and conservatives sit across from me here and say, oh, the whole time I just wanted government out of it. I just wanted it to be the states, and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you kind of never said that all along. Like, I get it now.
Yeah.
It can be a principled thing to say in hindsight, and it probably feels good, and maybe it's how you really felt about it. But when it was going down, that's not exactly how it is. So this is something where I think the progressives led on. And even if you don't agree with the judicial part of it, we got the result that we wanted.
Yeah, it's a very difficult situation when you politically agree with something, you morally agree with something, but it's not provided for in law. It's one of the hardest things. It tears at your head and your heart at the same time, and it's difficult to reconcile.
What do you make of the state of free speech right now? Because I say on the show all the time, I don't fear, and I still don't, that the government is coming for my free speech. I think, of course, there is an authoritarian side of Donald Trump and an antagonism towards the media, often deserved because the media has done such a terrible job. But of course, there's something there that could go horrifically awry. But what I fear more so is self-censorship, and that people are simply afraid to say what they think. What do you think about that?
Well, there were a lot of incidents recently. Milo's Berkeley speech of a group called Antifa, which is anti-fascism, and I'm not sure.
I don't think they understand irony.
Yeah. I'm not sure if they shortened it or if but yeah, that there's sort of an attitude going around that no platforming is acceptable, and not in the sense that um, schools won't allow someone to speak, as in, well, not allow, but as they just won't invite neo-Nazis to speak. Like, I don't have a problem with that. If you just say, okay, we don't want to, you know, we're not going to invite neo-Nazis to speak. But if a group gets together, funds it themselves, and says, look, we're gonna have this person speak. And I'm not trying to suggest that Milo's a neo-Nazi. I'm just giving an example.
Oh, we'll let the internet decide that.
Yeah. All right. But it's not no platforming in the sense that someone's going to exercise discretion. It's no platforming that even when discretion has been exercised, they just don't like it, so they're going to try and, barge through the door, prevent people from going in physically, shoot fireworks at the building. It's just, it's deplorable, for lack of a better term. I mean, it's just that these sorts of things are happening in America astounds me.
Yeah, and it's an important distinction that you're making. You're not saying that a university has to let anyone come and speak. They don't have to let neo-Nazis speak. They don't have to let white supremacists or black supremacists or whatever supremacists speak. But if a group at the university secures the funds, gets a room at the building and all of those things, and then someone violently or using force tries to stop it, therein lies the problem.
Yeah, I think that's accurate to say.
Yeah, but the left doesn't seem to be helping us out on this one.
Definitely not. Definitely not. I mean, especially with the various whisper campaigns that go on, there's sort of they're interested in smearing people before they're allowed to speak, so that they won't have to hear the ideas be expressed, and that's just. It's awful. I mean, it's difficult to try and articulate just how awful that is, but it goes against everything that I stand for. I mean, as someone who styles themselves as a writer, political essayist, that sort of thing, the First Amendment is my life, and they're violating not only the spirit of it, but if these people were in power, they would violate the First Amendment with impunity.
Right, and that's a great point, because they would crush all dissent. They wouldn't suddenly, if these people got to a place of power, they suddenly wouldn't become more tolerant of people that are against them. They would suddenly use their power to crush those other people. So is this somewhere that the right has done the right thing here? So for example, you could let any Marxist, socialist, crazy, far-off lefty speak at a university tomorrow. I'm sure it's happening all across the country right now, and nobody protests them. They let them speak, and a couple kids show up, and maybe a few more wear, some sick old shirt or something, but that's about it. I mean, so is this somewhere where the right actually is genuinely protecting free speech more than the left these days?
I do think that the right has been defending freedom of speech more than the left has, and it's difficult with political labels, because obviously there are going to be people like you, people who consider themselves on the left, who do value free speech, and there are going to be people on the right who don't. But I think in general, at least over the past, I don't know, 5 years or so, however long this sort of radical progressive movement has gained power, I think they've been pretty consistent on this. So.
What's next for you? What's the next move on YouTube? Do you blow this thing up? Are we looking at a network television show, a writing column with the Washington Times? Where are you going?
I'm not sure if any mainstream outlet will take me with all of the shit posting I do, but I'm hoping to grow what I have right now, and eventually I do want to have enough money to sort of finance my own independent journalism. I do hope to be able to go to different countries, and I've been called crazy on Twitter for this, but I want to go to places that nobody wants to be. I want to be able to go to Syria and see what's going on and be able to report those types of things. Because if there's one thing that I think a lot of people are uninformed about, it's foreign policy. It's foreign affairs. And so if I can get there and see these things for myself without having to, you know, not being forced to see it through a particular lens, I think that would be very helpful.
Yeah. Well, listen, it's very clear to me that you're fighting the good fight, and I'm glad that we've connected on Twitter over the past couple months, and everybody can check out your channel on YouTube. Just put Vernaculus, Vernaculis, in the search bar above, and we'll put a link to it right down below